You're tuned to member-supported radio, Canada's jazz station, JAZZ.FM91 Toronto. I'm Doug Watson. Music there from Phil Woods and the Quartet. A limited edition, very rare stuff indeed, available on Mosaic. We heard from Hal Galper on piano, Steve Gilmore was the bassist, and Bill Goodwin on drums. The one and only Phil Woods on alto saxophone. Good afternoon, Phil.
Good afternoon, Doug. Nice to see you again.
It's great to see you again and again, in that it's been about 10 years since we last spoke.
92, as people reminded me so kindly from the Toronto Festival.
Yeah. Well, you're a great friend of jazz and a great friend of Toronto. It's good to see you in town again, Phil.
It's good to be back, man. Good to be back.
A rare treat for our Toronto listeners to catch you live in action.
Well,
Very
I've always
exciting.
had a nice relationship up. I used to come up here quite often, you know, in the halcyon days of Canadian jazz. I mean, halcyon days were American jazz. You know, late 80s and stuff. There was Georgie Spaghetti's house, and Bourbon Street, and there was Doodoo's Dungeon up in Montreal, and Edmonton had some stuff happening in Vancouver. So we used to make a circuit quite a bit. Not so much anymore. So I always tell people that I'll come play your festival for nothing, but you got to give me a lot of money to get on that airplane, man. That's the gig, you know. It's getting harder.
Yeah.
I mean, I've kept the Quintet together for. We've celebrated almost our 30th year together with Bill Goodwin and Steve Gilmore. I don't think I could have maintained a band for 30 years just working in America. But touring in Japan, touring in Europe, doing the major festivals in Canada and around in Australia and what have you, the international aspects of the music. And that's all the result of the Voice of America in many ways. Willis Conover. I mean, as I took part in several State Department tours, one to Russia with Benny Goodman, to the Far East with Dizzy Gillespie, to South America with Dizzy, and especially after the war years, all of this, the Voice of America educated the whole world about jazz. The only problem was we never had a Voice of America for Americans. You know, we educated the whole world, but we kind of left out. I mean, we're catching up, but I mean, it was not popular on the airwaves. I think stations like what you have are the most important way of disseminating the information now.
Oh, well, thank you. We're doing our darndest to spread the word.
Hard to find a good jazz station in the States these days. It's like trying to find a mom-and-pop grocery store. Not many of those either.
Yeah, right. It's all glitz and glamour now.
It's all owned by three guys who play iwis and live offshore.
From Toronto, covering Ontario, Canada, and the world, this is JAZZ.FM91.
A whole gang of sax players out there listening right now to us, Phil. What's his setup? I want to know the reed, the mouthpiece, the whole nine.
Well, I've always used a Meyer. Oliver Nelson gave me the Meyer back in the late 50s. Meyer 5 medium, New York Meyer. I used Van Duren reed. I was using B16, but Van Duren has come out with a new reed, the Double Z, which is absolutely terrific and kind of works out well with the 82Z horn. Now I'm a Triple Z man. And the 82Z Yamaha.
So if I wanted to get the Phil Wood sound?
Long tones. I don't think there's any shortcut.
No.
I think that's partly... I mean, I could get a good sound when I was a kid. I mean, when I picked up the saxophone as a kid and I could play it, but I had no interest in playing it. But I was fortunate to have a teacher that recognized the fact that I had a fair retentive ability because I could play the lesson without ever practicing.
Yeah.
His name was Harvey LaRose, greatest teacher I ever had, and he realized that I had some talent. And in retrospect, I mean, it's easy to destiny and all that stuff because nobody arrives full-blown like the Phoenix by themselves. It could be the destiny of my music teacher to nurture me. I mean, everybody's destiny is intertwined, I've always felt, you know. But as I get closer to the end of the line, I appreciate the intricate, the importance of music. And I'm still learning about the healing process of music. And I believe that I was always destined to be an alto player. So I could get a good sound right in the beginning. I mean, I had a Phil Wood sound in the beginning, and that's nothing. That's a God-given or nature's gift, you know. I was blessed to be that.
Something that you were born with.
I think so. I think so. But then it was nurtured with good teachers and a lot of people.
Of course, and encouragement.
A lot of people. And I did my share of practicing, too.
Yeah.
Charlie Parker could play a tomato can, you know.
Yeah, and it would always
Benny Goodman could pick up any clarinet and sound like Benny Goodman. Artie Shaw could do the same. Yeah, a real player can pick up an instrument, and it becomes an extension of his psyche, his body. But a good instrument does make it easier.
Yes,
I mean, that is important. But nevertheless, you still retain your sound, which is really the name of the game when you're talking about jazz.
Lester Young once said that the individual sound was this was even in the 50s. He said, all these cats are going to Juilliard and whatnot, and you mean to tell me that the professor can't bring out the individual sound in all of these? He said 13 sax players and they all sound the same. How do you find it these days, being a jazz educator,
well, jazz
and
has
so immersed in it?
It's been collated and codified now into everybody carries the same books, they got the same mouthpiece, they're learning the same changes, everybody can play giant steps, but they can't play all the things you are, you know what I mean? And there's no training ground for kids anymore. There's no more big bands to travel and get kind of...
Exactly.
There's no regionalism. I mean, you used to have the Texas tenor sound, and you had the Kansas City cats, and you had the Chicago swing thing, and then the New York sound, and upstate New York, the heavy boppers. Mm-hmm. There's even a Canadian sound, I believe.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Yep.
I've always... Bickert,
I've always thought
Rob,
that.
Phil Nimmons. I mean, cats have an identity. You can spot them in 4 bars. Mm-hmm. I'm not so sure that's the case at the moment, but a great player will still. I mean, there are some players coming out. I can recognize John Gordon, a young alto player, immediately. Mm-hmm. Bill Charlap is quite distinct. A lot of people don't say, "Oh, jazz. I don't understand jazz and all that," but I always equate it to like if you follow baseball, you follow a rookie player from the farm team until he makes it to the pros. And you can tell by his batting stance who he is from the back. Mm-hmm. Or an opera singer. Pavarotti, you can spot the sound, the identity of the artist. And it's fun if you get into jazz, and that way when you just play, you put something on it, you hear the radio, and you say 2 notes, that's Al Cohen, and that's Zoot Sims, that's Coltrane, that's Charlie Parker, and you have immediately in your head a whole image springs to mind. And if you get into it a little bit and kind of do a little homework, it can be great fun to see some of these younger artists from their first records, and then 10 years later you listen to them and they say, you track the development, and it becomes like a pretty nice hobby in a way. You can give it a lot of pleasure. I went to New York in the late 40s to continue my education, there was no jazz school. I never even thought about going to jazz. I learned from going to the black clubs and playing. But to be a musician, I went to Juilliard as a clarinet major, which is the classic way of educating. It's a real European kind of thing. You learn the rudiments of the craft, and then you learn the instrument and the music, just the way Bach and Beethoven and Brahms did it, and then you pick what kind of music you want to make, you know. I mean, you can learn stuff in school, but it's what you get from your teacher, you pass on, and, you know, I firmly believe in that. That's why I like to do it. I really enjoy working with kids, because that's how I learned. I was probably the last generation to learn at the feet of the masters. I mean, I was there when Dizzy and Byrd and started. I was a kid, but I was involved in the beginnings. So I got it right from the horse's mouth. So, and I remember how generous they were in sharing information. So I think that's important for artists to give.
So you pass the torch along to them.
You got to give some back, man.
Way.
I think you got to give it back. You know?
And I know some of the guys out there, though, they learned the tough way. I mean, if you were in Mingus's band, you know, like Bob Mover and Jackie McLean and that, I've heard stories, and the way they pass it on, though, is not the tender way, because of the way they learn.
No, a lot of them lost teeth.
Jimmy Knepper.
Jimmy Knepper, for one. Jackie McLean got... Mingus was that's a little too hard for my taste, but...
So they learn the principles in the schools, but then the real learning is when they take it to the streets. And
well, all too often, what happens on the school level, the teacher will tell them the same thing that I will tell them this afternoon. But for some reason... Because, you know, if somebody with a reputation says, saying, well, my teacher told me the same thing. Well, why didn't you listen? You know what I mean? But it has more import coming from a veteran of the trenches, and I can appreciate that too. You know.
Hi, I'm Bob Parlocha. Join us at 9 tonight for the Jazz That Toronto Loves, right here on Jazz FM91.
You spoke earlier of a new horn that Yamaha has provided.
Yeah, the new horn. A friend of mine, Eric Doney, was in touch with Yamaha, and they mentioned they were doing a new sax, and he said, well, maybe Phil would like to try it. And make a long story short, Jim Murphy and Hiroshi Nishikage came to my house in Pennsylvania and brought me 3 prototypes. And I tried. It was okay. I picked up one. I picked up the other one, and then I picked up the third horn, unlacquered. And man, I knew this was it. I mean, it was great. It's the vintage horn of the future, I think. I've fallen in love with the horn, and I don't speak lightly about that. You know, some pros, I said, check it out, because I said, oh, come on, Woods, you're a Selmer guy. I said, well, I go where the grass is greenest,
Yeah.
And they pick it up and they say, I see what you mean. So much for the commercial, but I mean it, and you couldn't give me enough money to endorse an instrument that wasn't proper. I mean, I've always had a bit of integrity, and I can honestly say that this is probably the finest horn around.
Yeah.
Kind of cool.
you have a brand new album that is
Yes.
about to be released.
It's only available in Japan at the moment. It's on Venus. It's the first album I've ever done with just a string section. Bill Charlap and Steve Gilmore and Bill Goodwin. And Brian Lynch did a lot of the writing, my
great
frontline
trumpet player. Yeah,
But he also is a great composer. He just got his doctorate in composition from NYU. And it's pretty neat. In fact, they tell me that in Japan, it's in the jazz category, it's number 2 to Norah Jones. That ain't bad.
Hey.
You know, it's not I wouldn't call it hardcore jazz. It's all standards. It's you know, just playing the melody, which is not so easy as it sounds. You know?
Lee Konitz said that very thing.
That's probably the most difficult. I mean, you know, when Byrd, I'm not putting myself in the category, but when Charlie Parker with strings came on, everybody said, all he's doing is playing the melody, you know, that's only the hardest thing in the world to make a melody live, you know, and just to decorate it and not obscure it, you know, that's art of a high form, and that was my role model in doing. I've done other albums with strings, but this is the first one that singers always use the verses, but all too often musicians don't know the verses or the lyrics. I never play a song unless I might not have the lyrics down verbatim, but I like to check the verses, and I like to hear what the lyrical intent of the wordsmith is when he writes the song. It isn't just the music. Prez was the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Prez, I mean, the old guys, they knew what the song. Ben Webster, they knew what the song meant. I think it was Hart's Widow that somebody said. Richard Rodgers wrote Blue Room, and she said, no, Richard Rodgers wrote da 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 da. My husband wrote Blue Room, you know, the words.
Right,
Rodgers did not write the words, although he was a lyricist for some of his songs. But yeah, it takes 2 to tango for the most part.
Yeah, yeah. So you would...
Cole Porter said, imagine taking 2 people to write a song.
Now there's brilliance. Yeah.
Well, I'm a big fan of the American Songbook. I really think that's... I mean, where would Charlie Parker be without Jerome Kern or Ray Noble? I mean, the Bridge of Cherokee. Because Charlie Parker said when he heard the Bridge of Cherokee, all of his things fell into place. Well, that's the American Songbook, and that reference is so important. You know, that the songs that the jazz came from, it's a song from the movies and the theater and Broadway. You know, it wasn't just field hollers, and it wasn't just bordellos in New Orleans. Right. There were other places where that influenced the jazz, European harmony, and all of that stuff.
This very thing. I mean, when I hear the work of Harold Arlen, like Last Night when we were young, I swear it's only a couple steps shy of Wagner. You know.
Yeah, the best music lessons in the world are a Harold Arlen lead sheet.
Yeah.
In fact, that's one of my favorite tunes. I just played it. Mary McPartland celebrated her 80th birthday. And that's her favorite song Last Night when we were young. So Bill Charlap and I played it for her.
Oh, yeah.
Has no verse, by the way.
Is that a fact?
One of the few Harold Arlens that doesn't have a verse. But what a song.
Oh, yeah.
And Bill Charlap, of course, his dad was Moose Charlap,
Yep.
who did the music to Peter Pan. And Sandy Stewart is his mom. So, and he's a big fan of the American Songbook. So he said, you got a lead sheet on Last Night when we were young? Because we'd been playing it, but sometimes when you keep playing a song, you learn it wrong. We just wanted to make sure we had it correct. You know what I mean? It's not 3 notes there; it's 2 notes to accommodate the lyric. Little things like that. You know, it's got to be as perfect as possible. I'll even carry it a step further when I can, as to try to rent the movie that it's from and see what the composer did in the Hollywood version, because all too often you get voicings that even are not on the lead sheet, you know, depending on who the orchestrator was. You can the orchestrator usually worked well with the composer. And then I'll go to the piano. I always learn a tune at the keyboard first, before I'll even try to play it on the saxophone, and see, and getting the original lead sheet and just putting it under the microscope, you know, make sure that I can get it in the original key first, and then make sure that it's the key that I put it in suits my instrument.
Exactly.
It sings. It sings.
Yep.
But right on with what you said.
Well, I think we're filling in a few holes here, Phil.
Well, I hope
Pardon
so,
the
man.
pun.
I do prattle on, but
Yeah, not at all.
I enjoy talking with you.
It's been great to see you again.
Thank you,
know,
man.
we're going to have to do this in another 10 years,
Let's
I think.
do it. Well, let's try to get it a little quicker than that, shall we?
Yes. My guest this afternoon has been Phil Woods. Once again, Phil, a pleasure.
Thank you, baby.
Great.
Thank you, Doug.
We'll talk again soon.
Okay,
Thanks.
I hope so.